Our ENCA reporter Aaron Bates is with me to unpack what came out of the inquiry today. Let's begin perhaps with Barbara Hogan's testimony, Aaron. Towards the end there, I think the full summation of what she had to say, none of it really a glowing report for former President Jacob Zuma. It really paints a very glim light on him and also on the ANC.
It does, and this issue of the ANC being on trial just becomes more and more of a question as the testimony proceeds. And of course, Barbara Hogan herself is a cadre of the party, someone who served in prison as a member of the ANC when it was still banned and underground. And what she said was, at best, Zuma was confused about what he could and couldn't do as head of state and where the boundary lay between his authority, his executive authority, that of the minister, and then the authority of boards and CEOs at SOEs. And what she also said, with evidence led by Advocate Mokoena, is that in line with what those two South American experts on state capture had said, that SOEs are often the site where state capture really takes place, because that's where government money is allocated, is to these companies owned by the state.
All right, let's talk then also about today, who was in that public gallery. Much of the news this morning being dominated by the appearance of Duduzane Zuma, at least, among the crowd.
Yes, and in fact, I did urge him to speak to us on the record. He declined, but he had been subpoenaed as a witness to the inquiry and was there with his legal team because initially today had been earmarked for cross-examination of DPDC journalists who, of course, Duduzane Zuma and Mzwane's legal teams want to interrogate over his version of events. But that's been postponed, and Zuma's legal team, this is Zuma Jr., his legal team has raised a grievance about that. They say they should have a better protocol, and since journalists had notified the inquiry's legal team last week that he wanted to apply for a postponement, that Duduzane Zuma's legal team should have been informed then. So essentially she was there to cross-examine Phumla Williams, but evidently she wasn't there. But
the person who was there today and in fact insisted on staying was Jimmy Manyi, to give his side of the story. Of course, after that Phumla Williams testimony, he applied to come and speak before the commission because he thought there were a lot of untruths that Williams told.
Yes, he wanted to correct things on his facts, not Phumla Williams's facts. And so he was, as you say, insistent that he speak today. In fact, his matter had been dealt with right after Duduzane Zuma's grievance, and then it was decided that he would appear on the 23rd of November. He stayed, attended proceedings as we heard the last of Barbara Hogan's testimony, and then a member of the legal team raised, it was Advocate Maleka, raised that Manyi wanted to address Zondo directly, at which point he made his case emphatically for correcting these two narrow points on Phumla Williams' testimony. And Kathy, I think what maybe people will miss if they weren't in those moments of the proceedings or following them is that I think it was a very delicate moment for the chair of the inquiry, because it could have been very easy for Zondo to simply dismiss Manyi, having dealt with the matter in the morning, having agreed on this postponement to the 23rd of November, which was the original date earmarked for Manyi's testimony. But Zondo listened prudently. He listened carefully to the reasons that Manyi gave, many cogent reasons why he should be able to put forward his version today, having availed himself to attend the inquiry, and then made a ruling that after lunch Manyi could have his time to go through those two narrow issues. So I thought it was a very telling moment on why Zondo is the chair of this inquiry, because he was careful, I thought, to be quite fair.
And why did Mr. Manyi insist on in fact, Mzwanele, to correct us there? Why did he insist on going today?
Well, beg your pardon. What had happened was he'd received a letter from the inquiry's legal team to say, although the 23rd of November had been earmarked for him to come to the inquiry and provide testimony, that there was an opening for today. And so on Zondo's announcements, it seems that there was then some confusion whether or not Manyi would be testifying today, whether he would not. And so he availed himself and presented himself at the inquiry with papers, with reports he'd gotten at some difficulty from GCIS on irregularities irregularities, he said, preceded his time and his tenure as the head of GCIS. And so he'd gone to some effort to avail himself, to get his papers in order, and to be there to provide his input. And so he said, I'm here, I've made this effort, you should hear me. And Advocate Maleka then said, well, if you want to take that risk, we have a whole slew of things we want to traverse with you. But Zondo said, no, Manyi wants to deal with these two narrow issues. He's made himself available effectively. Let's hear him out.
A significant part of his testimony, Aaron, also seemed to centre on discrediting Phumla Williams and what she had told the Commission around the going-ons at GCIS. In fact, I mean, he's gone as far as to say, well, there were irregularities that took place under Phumla Williams, which I had to clean up when I came in.
Exactly. He really characterized himself as Mr. Cleanup, that he came in, he wanted to spruce up GCIS, he wanted to give it like a fresh coat of paint effectively and deal with some of the historical issues, including this bid committee. And he really took issue. He really sort of shredded Phumla Williams's depiction of a bid committee, which he says he completely overhauled after arriving, and argued that he'd done so on necessity, that this bid committee had been in place for a long time. He said Phumla Williams had sat on that committee for 10 years, and then he actually said, yes, 10 years, can you believe it? And so he wanted to have a new bid committee in place, he argues, because he thought that a new bid committee would be less vulnerable to sort of historical corruption and cozy relationships with service providers. So he raised that. He also raised two incidents of financial irregularities. He drew on a Treasury report about a sort of dubious bid between a service provider and GCIS, and effectively said at the end of it, you know, that he was there to try and clean up what had gone wrong, and that it didn't start with him. If anything, he was the person who tried to resolve that. But on the end of that, on the tail end of that, Kathy, he also dealt with this SMS that he'd sent Phumla Williams when she was giving testimony.
And this is the SMS that went viral, that
yes.
Phumla Williams put before the Commission.
Correct, and that she actually raised at the Commission as him interfering with her testimony. He says that's not what he meant to do. Let's have a look.
Without understanding, Chairperson, I'm not a lawyer, without understanding the legalities, I thought, hey, my colleague is just forgotten the chronology. During break, in good faith, Chairperson, let me just call her to say, when you go back, can you just find a way of ensuring that you correct this chronology and so on. That's all I asked for. And I even asked Mr. Mabunda to say, Mr. Mabunda, we are not sitting very far from the evidence leader. Just get her to even ask the question whether was it Manyi. Because I just thought, Chairperson, we are here in this commission to tell the truth and nothing but the truth. So if I am seeing that something is wrong and I have an opportunity to correct it on real time, and the importance of this real time, Chairperson, is this. We've got media sitting at the back. Now, media takes everything real time. They tweet it. They do all kinds of things with it. And the importance of that is that other people make decisions based on what media is saying. One of the institutions that relies on media reports are the banks. The banks that are busy guarding their reputations, rightly so, take a lot of their input from the media. So I just thought I had a duty to make sure that the media must report that which is right, but at the same time, let's not create a thing here that Manyi did this, which he did not do.
You were not saying she must change what she believed was the truth.
Yeah.
You believed that she was mistaken, yeah, and you wanted to help her to remember the exact position.
Yeah, correct, Chairperson.
All right, Aaron, let's leave it there for today. Aaron Bates was covering the Zondo Commission of Inquiry for us today.